Hello everyone, welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Hembar, and we have another Arthurian video. In particular, we have another Percival Arthurian video. Well, really, though, the Grail quest is often pretty separate from Arthur's court, right? If we read Percival by Chrétien d'Artois at this point, it's pretty separate. We had Perceval by Wolfram von Eichenbach, and it's pretty separate. And we even read Percival of Gallus by some anonymous Middle English writing author, and it's pretty separate as well. So this one, though, is a bit more focused actually on the Arthurian court. In some ways, it reads a lot like some other romances that just kind of are focusing on lots of going ons, but it is really particular to still the Grail. Okay, well, the last one I looked at didn't actually have the Grail at all. This one has your pretty typical idea of the Grail, right? It is the Holy Cup, blah blah blah, right? So this is written in Old French. It is from the 13th century, and it is actually considered very uncanonical as an Arthurian tale. It is very different and very interesting. Has some interesting stuff going on in it. We'll talk about that and why it's kind of weird and out there. But it also just has some other things going on that makes it entertaining and fun to read. So what's cool about this translation I read, actually, the High Book of the Grails, the full name for it, but it's one we called Perlesvaus, after the main character, which is Percival. And the first thing, obviously, is he had an interesting name change to Perlesvaus. The translation I read, Nigel Bryant, is also the translator for Persephorus. I did not do a video on, but a very, very long Old French romance has like the first version that we have of like Sleeping Beauty, for example, and it's very different than the rated G version of Sleeping Beauty that we might know. So this is more like rated R. And anyways, but this is an interesting book, right? So we have a lot of interesting stuff going on. One thing besides the fact that it is about the Grail is that the Grail stuff actually is concluded at some point. There's a conquest of the Grail, like in the castle and stuff going on. But then there's a bunch of other stuff that just happens afterwards, which is, again, how I would say this is in some ways more connected to some other Arthurian stuff. But it seems like the stuff that happens at the end, after the Grail bit is done and over with, is just tangential almost. But so supposedly this is right, almost certainly not true, just one of these things that these medieval authors would say. This is taken from a Latin text which was found at Avalon by a guy named Josephus, who was a scribe, who wrote that one. And so you'll see references to, Josephus tells us this, or whatever. So it actually starts with Arthur, though, of all people. It does not start with Perlesvaus. And in fact, it takes a while to get to Perlesvaus. In fact, we don't have him for a good chunk. So we don't have his early childhood stuff. We don't have like the Red Knight stuff going on. We have a bunch of adventures of Arthur and Lancelot and Gawain before you get to Perlesvaus. So what's funny, though, is it starts with Arthur and everyone hates him because he's not as good as he once was, right? He's shameful, right? He's the worst king in the world, right? And he goes on a journey, and he wants to take a squire with him, but he's dissuaded from taking anyone with him when this squire has a dream, and in his dream he steals a candlestick for Arthur and Guinevere, and then he gets accosted by a knight for stealing this candlestick. He steals it from like a chapel, and then this knight kills him in the dream. Turns out, when he wakes up, he's dying because he's been stabbed somehow in reality, and he has the candlestick with him, which is like the first odd thing about this book. And he slowly gives it to Arthur still. But anyways, very different start. And then a maiden tells Arthur of Perlesvaus killing. So she does mention killing the Red Knight, but it's not in the way we know the story. Again, narrative very different. The Red Knight is fighting a White Knight in Perlesvaus through a javelin, for example. So the javelin's still there, but he didn't know to kill the knight, apparently, in his youthful naivete, right? Now, Perlesvaus's father is dead, and his mother is besieged. So this is another one, like the last one we looked at, Percival of Gallus, where his mother is still alive. If we read in Perceval and Percival by Chrétien d'Artois, his mom dies like immediately after. So I think it's handled really well, actually, in Percival of Gallus. It's okay here as well. It's not a big focus, I would say, in a lot of ways. So pretty much what we're getting at the beginning is the results of these misdeeds of Perlesvaus for not asking about the Grail, or rather the Fisher King's wound. He doesn't ask about it, so a bunch of bad stuff happens, right? And so while this is a cause for mourning in the other romances that we have read and I've read and talked about here, it hasn't had such an outward and extreme negative impact that is very evident at the beginning of this romance. Rather, it just brought the Fisher King more grief, right? And he gets some hate for it, but it's not like the end of the world, pretty much, type of thing. So this book is interesting in a few things, like I said, because Perlesvaus takes a while to show up. We're just getting results of his stuff and people looking for him to solve the problem, essentially. But it also seems to be much more focused on religious piety, and it's much more preachy, I'd say, in a lot of ways, this book. And failure is a bit more evident, right, in a lot of ways. It's kind of on the nose in some sense. Percival is still the main character, right? He gets a chance at redemption. There's no Galahad, right? But again, first it's Arthur, then considerably longer episode of Gawain, who is not the best knight as we expect, right? Because Perlesvaus exists here. But he does make an error, actually. And then we have Lancelot, right, at the castle of the Beards, which makes you cut your beard if you want to go by. So Lancelot has a beard, apparently. I don't view these knights normally with beards. I guess that's a romantic image I'm thinking of, though. Maybe the occasional mustache, but not beards. And we do get to see some interesting things. Like there's a waste city that Lancelot encounters. Actually, it has a pretty great description. I see if I can find it for you. Let's see, right here. Lancelot looked into the distance, and a city appeared to view. He rode on towards it at a swift pace and saw that the city was so huge it seemed to fill an entire country. But he could see its walls crumbling round about, and the gates leaning with age. He rode inside to find the city quite empty of inhabitants, its great palaces derelict and waste, its markets and exchanges empty, its vast graveyards full of tombs, its churches ruined. Through the great streets he rode until he found a huge palace which seemed to be in better condition and less ruined than the others. Then he has an experience here, actually, where he beheads someone, but he has to make a promise that he would come back, I think in a year and a day, to be beheaded, right? So it kind of has this Sir Gawain the Green Knight thing. Well, rather the motif is there, but it's the same motif, right? And we get like, it's a back and forth, back and forth. The narrative is super complicated. It's really actually kind of written like a modern novel in some ways, except for the chunks are really small. And some modern novels are written like that, but you're going back and forth and kind of hard and complex, hard to follow, complex, right? We do get Perlesvaus eventually at the beginning of branch 7, which is pretty much chapter 7, right? And he duels Lancelot, right? And neither can overcome the other, right? Because they're just two of the greatest knights. But actually, at the end, Lancelot's more hurt than Perlesvaus is from this bout. Then they go to the Fisher King. Well, there's the Hermit King as well as Palace. But this branch is mostly actually about Clamados of the Shadows, who is the son of the Red Knight, here to get revenge against Percival. He kills a lion to get that revenge, or kind of to get there towards Percival. He's one of these people looking for Percival. Kind of similar in a sense to Gawain killing the lion in Perceval, though it's shorter, more straightforward, not as entertaining to read. He's also challenged for the killing of the lion after he has his challenge go down for Percival, the challenge to battle Percival. And Lancelot also has an experience where he finds a city that is perpetually burning, unless there's a king that becomes king for a year and then casts himself into the fire to extinguish it. Pretty wild stuff. Sorry, I have a new desk. I'm not quite used to it yet. It's causing my camera to shake. It was a $10 desk, I should say. So this is also apparently the first appearance for Arthurian lore of Claudius and Brian, which does come up later in the end of the romance, but also the first appearance of the questing beasts, though it is a very different questing beast than that in the post-Vulgate cycle. It's very different. I don't even know if I want to describe it to you. Just look at Perlesvaus's questing beast. It's small and it's actually kind of a good thing in some sense. So, but you have some other stuff. You have like stuff like that, right? You have this weird stuff going on. Another oddity, though, is along with this excessive violence, actually, compared to other romances. It's pretty violent, right? And it's pretty racist against Jews for some reason. You got lots of dwarves and whatnot, and they're never good. And then you also have Kay, who is part of this violence, though. he's not normally the nicest of fellows in these romances. But he is a loyal retainer of Arthur's in these romances, right? Even in the Percival romances, right? He slaps the lady or whatever, right? And that's inappropriate of him. But he's not terrible. He's not evil, right? Uh, in this, though, Loholt is the son of Guinevere and Arthur. Okay, he does come up in other stuff, but he's more of like a bastard of Arthur in most other romances. But here he is actually the legitimate son of Guinevere and Arthur. And he is slain here actually by Kay. He is killed by Kay because Kay wants to gain the claim. I guess he wants to claim the killing of a giant that Loholt killed, and Loholt is actually able to be killed in this situation because Loholt apparently sleeps on the body of the people he kills after he kills them, which is really weird. And there's no comment really about this. It's just his custom, and that's cool, I guess. And so there's something about a chest, and it has Loholt's no, I think is it Loholt's head? I think there's a lot of heads. But pretty much the only person, yeah, I think it's Loholt's head, and only the Slayer can open the head. And so Kay opens his head, or opens his chest. It's Loholt's head. Turns out, oh, now everyone knows Kay killed Loholt. So this event is actually, he actually joins. He's banished. He joins Arthur's enemies. He kind of actually just flees. This event is referenced though in the later Lancelot Grail cycle connected to this. Guinevere dies from grief though from this event, and so the timeline of Arthur and Lancelot is altered in this romance in a sense. So though Lancelot does hold Lady Guinevere above everything else, and this is why he's not able to see the Grail, that does happen before this little Holt scene. So again, pretty complex, jumps back and forth a lot. The Grail here, of course, is not a serving dish. It's also not a rock, and it is present though, not unlike the last one. Its chalice is used in the Mass and is imbued with grace. It is the cup used at the Last Supper, and apparently Joseph of Arimathea collected some of the Savior's blood in it too, right? So it's using both of those tropes. There is a cool scene about a dragon knight, and it is a knight that has a dragon's head on his shield that burns, like it magically burns people. Super cool. I'm going to read the description here. The Knight of the Burning Dragon has entered your land and is destroying castles and cities and knights and whatever lies in his path. And no one dares oppose him, for he is a good foot taller than any knight you've ever seen, with a terrible face and bent upon wicked deeds. And his sword is 3 times longer than any knight's, and his lance is as much as any man can bear. And 2 knights could cover themselves with his shield. And on it is the head of a dragon, which belches fire and flame whenever he wants, so fierce and scorching that no man can endure it, and no armor, however strong, can give protection. And that sounds like a Dark Souls like enemy, to be completely honest. So it's very interesting. But there's a lot of stuff in this one, and a lot of stuff in this one that is not in the 3 other romances I've read, like the Black Hermit, which shows up at the beginning of the book, and he's actually like the climax of the book is considering this Black Hermit. And again, it's more connected to the Arthurian court than the other romances, which are a bit more disconnected from the broader Arthuriana stuff. So, but this is connected in a lot of almost an apocryphal way, right? It's considered a lot of really not canonical, right? Because it's just so different. But entertaining. I enjoyed this one. So, not the most gripping, but a lot of interesting stuff in it that makes it worthwhile, I think. So if you've read Perlesvaus, let me know. And if not, maybe give it a read. Maybe give it a go. So anyways, Liam from Liam's Icing. I'll catch you next time. Probably with Paradur. That's probably the next one we're going to be doing.